This is the voice of Mars, the winds of another world, recorded by the Perseverance rover and carried to us by radio waves across the unfathomable distance of space. I find these voices frightening on some primal level. They are the sounds of silence, whispers of a vast emptiness, providing us with no answers to the great questions we have posed the cosmos. Here on Earth, there is a great deal of noise being made about space exploration, with Mars being the long-term goal. But as I look upon the images relayed to us by the robotic explorers, Perseverance and Curiosity, all those vistas of lifeless desolation, I can't help but wonder why. What is it about Mars that fascinates humanity so much, that time after time we're willing to throw expensive technology across the void in hopes of unlocking its mysteries? Stranger still is the notion that Mars could be made into another home for us. I'm going to tell you why I think that's a misguided and even dangerous idea. But first, we need to delve into the history of Mars exploration. Fascination with Mars is not a new phenomenon. Scientific and public interest in the red planet bloomed in the 19th century as advancements in telescopes enabled scientists for the first time to observe our neighboring planet. It was around this time that the exciting idea of life on Mars spread far and wide. Flights of fancy along these lines really blew up in 1877 when the Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli published his observations of channels on Mars, patterns of long straight lines crisscrossing the planet's surface, supposedly carrying water. Coincidentally, the famous Suez Canal had just been finished a few years prior, so it didn't take a huge leap of imagination for people to start imagining canals and their builders on other planets. This observation gave rise to the idea of a sister civilization living on Mars, building canals to irrigate their dying planet with water from its polar regions. This idea became widespread thanks to the work of American businessman, astronomer, and writer Percival Lowell, who became infatuated with the idea of Mars's canal builders and dedicated his life to propagating the idea. From his private observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, he spent years gazing at Mars and drew detailed maps of the supposed Martian canals. He released several books on the canal builders of Mars, which became bestsellers. Mars mania was on. Even the respectable New York Times ran complete fictions about a Martian civilization, as if they were serious science reporting. The supposed Martian civilization inspired many artists of the time. Lowell's ideas likely informed the science fiction author H.G. Wells, who penned the seminal alien invasion story, The War of the Worlds, in 1897. An imagined Martian civilization was also the setting of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom series of books starring John Carter. Cultural interest into Mars waned in the following decades as scientists determined from more accurate studies and observations that there was no liquid water in Mars's atmosphere. Though some astronomers had seen or claimed to have seen the canals over the years, many others had not, and as the observation techniques improved, it became ever clearer that no canals had ever existed. But if that was the case, what had Lowell and Schiaparelli and others like them been mapping? Today these canals are explained by optical illusions. One theory even suggests that Percival Lowell had in fact been mapping the blood vessels of his own retinas, which can become visible when staring through a telescope for a long time. A simpler explanation is that Lowell had an overactive imagination and he saw what he wanted to see on the surface of Mars. He would not be the last to do so. Up until the dawning of the space age, there were still widely held beliefs that the seasonal color changes of Mars indicated plant life on the planet. This dream of a living Mars died its final death in 1965 when the Mariner 4 space probe made its flyby of the planet and sent us the first close-up images, confirming that there were no canals flowing with water, no cloudy skies, no fields of alien plant life, and certainly no civilization shaping the surface of the planet. The seasonal color changes had been nothing more than dust storms blowing over the cratered surface of a desolate world. Mars was a dead and dry rock, all signs of life a mere mirage in the desert. But this was only the beginning of a new age of robotic exploration of the planet. To date, humanity has sent dozens of missions to the Red Planet, involving flybys, orbiters, landers, robotic rovers, and just recently, for the first time, a flying drone. Scientists still chase the elusive dream of life existing somewhere in Mars's distant past. There are many signs in Martian geography that liquid water flowed on the planet in its ancient past, but to this day we still have not found any undisputed evidence of even single-celled organisms ever having existed on the planet. Perhaps one day evidence of life on the planet will be found. I cannot say. I do, however, find it fascinating just how much effort humanity has put into exploring this planet, which so far has afforded us nothing but bitter disappointments. I believe this longing speaks of a deep existential dread within ourselves. We just can't stomach the idea of being all alone here on our little planet. Space is so very, very large, and we are so very, very small. There just has to be something out there. And if there isn't, then by God, we'll just have to put ourselves there. Elon Musk is a fictional character that bears a passing resemblance to a technology entrepreneur of the same name. This character is a billionaire maverick who dreams large and executes on those dreams at the cutting edge of technology. He is the archetypical great engineer and comprehensive designer, the kind of industrialist superhero that American popular culture is so fond of. Of the many projects that Elon Musk occupies himself with, his North Star is the colonization of Mars. Posters of the Red Planet, gradually transformed to a garden world, have adorned both SpaceX's offices and Musk's Twitter profile. Musk himself has described his dream in terms of securing mankind's future. Here's Musk in his own words. I would like to die thinking that humanity has a bright future. If we can solve sustainable energy and be well on our way to becoming a multiplanetary species with a self-sustaining civilization on another planet, that would be good. Now, at face value, this sounds like a noble goal, but there is a flaw in this line of thinking. Musk makes it a habit of ignoring the fact that we don't have a sustainable civilization here on Earth, let alone the means to build one on another. Our modern world is built on the rotting foundation of a fossil fuel economy and an outdated ideology that demands unlimited growth in a system of limited resources. But of course, if Musk tried to change that, he'd be challenging the system that gave him his wealth and power. Instead of true futurism, a vision of a world past capitalism and consumption, Elon Musk offers us a shiny illusion of rocket ships and expensive toys for the rich. If securing the future of humanity truly were Elon Musk's goal, one would imagine that he would direct his boundless energy to saving this planet. Yet solar energy, electric cars and other potential, if questionable, solutions to sustainable energy have largely played a second fiddle to Musk's Martian ambitions. He views Earth as something to escape, the proverbial cradle we must leave to grow up as a species, rather than the only place we know of in the universe where sustained human life is possible. Musk is an engineer of dreams, one of the few leading figures of our modern age that has given the public a vision of a new kind of world to strive for. A future that isn't just another application on your phone or another streaming service where you can watch superhero movies. But I personally find it disappointing that neither Musk nor any other visionary has managed to summon the same kind of enthusiasm for a future where we've averted climate change and our impending ecological disaster. These are enormously challenging goals for our species, but even in all their complexity, they are surely more achievable than planting the human organism on a planet it did not evolve on. Of late, there's been some disillusionment among the public about Musk as a person. While his company's stocks and rockets have soared and his personal wealth has grown to fantastical and nightmarish proportions, Musk's personal brand has suffered due to his erratic behavior. Musk is also known as a boss who expects total slavish dedication from his employees, at the expense of personal and family life. His attitudes towards labor rights in particular have shown that rather than some visionary working for the common good, Musk is, at the end of the day, just another billionaire concerned with protecting his wealth and power, and lording over his serfs like some neo-feudal prince, or techno-king, as Musk himself has put it, and Imperator of Mars. Wink. Ironically framed delusions of grandeur aside, Musk's aversion to labor unions and a healthy work-life balance paints a picture of a man who doesn't just want to dedicate his own life to pursuing his visions. He also expects everyone working for him to do the same. Musk is not the first rocket enthusiast to set his eyes on Mars. Werner von Braun was the chief architect of the Saturn V rocket that made the Apollo moon landings possible. He was also the man who, earlier in his life, created the V-2 rocket for Nazi Germany, before jumping the pawn to the US. It's debatable how dedicated von Braun was to the Nazi cause, but he did use actual slaves in his actual rocket factory. More people were murdered manufacturing the V-2 rockets than were ever killed with them as a weapon, each rocket having cost about 6 human lives. Von Braun was a man driven by larger-than-life visions and it's clear he didn't much mind sacrificing the lives of others to pursue them.
Gather round while I sing you of Werner von Braun, a man whose allegiance is ruled by expedience. Call him a Nazi, he won't even frown. Nazi schmazi, says Werner von Braun. Don't say that he's hypocritical, say rather that he's apolitical. Once the rockets are up, who cares where they come down? That's not my department, says Werner von Braun.
Most men probably would have been professionally satisfied putting a man on the moon, but von Braun saw the moon only as a stepping stone into the greater space beyond. 17 years before the Apollo program was realized, von Braun had already envisioned a manned mission to Mars in his 1952 book / technical manual, The Mars Project. The book is densely packed with physics equations related to a voyage to Mars. But nowhere in the volume does von Braun stop to defend the foundation of his idea and tell us why we should go to Mars. He only seems to be interested in the how. Von Braun has this in common with his spiritual descendants at SpaceX. Elon Musk and his company have detailed plans about how to reach Mars, but their plans about how to actually live there seem flimsy in comparison. Musk has suggested, for example, building great domed cities on Mars, a planet that is struck by meteorites around 200 times a year. Percival Lowell, Werner von Braun, and Elon Musk have each in their own way projected their earthly ambitions onto the distant surface of Mars. But the Red Planet has made a habit of disappointing us. Mars does not care for us. If we are to consider what it would be like for humans to live on Mars, we must begin with the cold, hard facts on the ground. And they are very, very cold and very, very hard. Like Earth, Mars is a rocky planet with a metal core. It's considerably smaller and only about a tenth as massive as Earth. And its gravity is only about a third of our own planet's. Unlike Earth, Mars is geologically mostly inactive. On Earth, the planet's magnetic field is generated by flowing metal in its molten core, the heart of a living planet. Mars's heart stopped beating a long time ago, which is why the planet has no magnetosphere to speak of. That's a problem for colonization. A planetary magnetic field helps to protect the atmosphere from erosion by solar wind. Unlike Venus, Mars doesn't have enough gravity to hold on to its gases without one. A thick atmosphere is important because it protects the surface from ionizing radiation and ultraviolet light. The radiation on Mars's surface isn't so strong it would kill a wandering astronaut where they stand, but it would be necessary to protect long-term habitats somehow. One workable idea might be to build habitats in ancient lava caves which already exist on the planet. But radiation is just one of many health hazards on the Red Planet. Another big one is the air, or lack thereof. Whatever atmosphere Mars once had has mostly been stripped away, leaving behind a ragged, thin layer of toxic gases. What little remains consists mostly of carbon dioxide and almost no oxygen, a deadly mix to humans. Lack of oxygen, however, is a minor hurdle compared to the real problem, which is the lack of atmospheric pressure. On Mars it is less than 1/100th of Earth's at the surface level, well below the Armstrong limit. That means that if you were to venture out on Mars's surface without a suit, your last memory before passing out would likely be the sensation of your own saliva boiling on your tongue. Death would follow within a couple of minutes. All this is just a sampling of the many dangers Mars has to offer for the creatures of another world. I think it's safe to say that Mars, as it exists today, cannot support a large population. But what if Mars itself could be changed? What if we could take that rock floating in space and turn it into a garden? What makes a living planet? The same thing that moves everything else in the universe: energy. Life operates on a budget of energy, and on Earth that budget has been quite generous. The Sun is the source of most of the energy that flows through the Earth's system, if you discount heat from the planet's interior, heat which Mars also doesn't have. Any system we create on Mars would thus only have a fraction of the energy budget of Earth. This is something we cannot change. We cannot move Mars any closer to the Sun, nor can we make the Sun burn any brighter. What Mars gets is all we have to work with. Still, if certain conditions were met, it's believed that what Mars gets might be enough to create a habitable environment of some kind. The red planet straddles the outer edges of our solar system's habitable zone. So if a thicker atmosphere and a strong greenhouse effect could be created, the temperature and pressure on surface could be lifted to a more hospitable level. One way to do that might be to release the CO2 locked into dry ice in Mars's polar regions. We might heat them up with, for example, enormous mirrors on Mars's orbit. Or we could lob a Cold War arsenal's worth of nuclear bombs at the Martian polar regions and hope for the best, as suggested by Elon Musk. You know, whatever works. If we could release enough gas to increase the atmospheric pressure to a sizable fraction of Earth's, humans could walk around outside with just an oxygen mask. And if we solve the toxic soil problem, we might even grow plants outside, which over centuries and millennia could oxygenate the planet. Unfortunately, even in the best imaginable scenarios, Mars would never become a summer planet of maidens dancing in fields of flowers. Mars's blackbody equilibrium is much lower than Earth's, which means that even if Mars's greenhouse effect was just as strong as Earth's, and its atmospheric pressure was high, the average temperature would still be around a -25 degrees. So even after extensive terraforming, the best we could hope for is an Antarctic environment. And even this dismal plan only works if there is enough CO2 on the planet to begin with, and a recent inventory suggests that there just isn't. According to a 2018 study, even if we could release all of the CO2 locked in Mars's soil, and the study was quick to remind us that we can't, but even if we could, it would still not be enough to increase the atmospheric pressure or temperature in any meaningful sense. If all of the CO2 on Mars was released, the best we could hope for is an atmospheric pressure of around 7% of Earth's, nowhere near what we need. Now, I'm not a scientist or an engineer. I can't give you a comprehensive picture of everything that would be needed to terraform Mars, or how realistic those plans are. But personally, I believe that even if all these enormous technical challenges were solved in theory, humankind would still not colonize Mars. Even the most optimistic scenarios entail some of the most ambitious and difficult projects ever undertaken by humanity, all for uncertain results decades centuries, or even thousands of years into the future. And how many projects has humanity undertaken on such a time scale? The Catholic Church and other projects of faith come to mind, but religious organizations aren't who I'd turn to in the face of a technical and scientific challenge. Yet something like religious devotion may be needed here. This is not the kind of project that could ever be realized by corporations seeking profit and growth on a quarterly basis. Rather, it would be more akin to the centuries-long construction projects of the great cathedrals of Europe. The people who embark on this colossal undertaking must be working for something larger than themselves. They must work knowing that they will never rest in the shadows of the trees they have planted. I don't believe Mars can inspire that sort of transgenerational devotion. I think so because we already have one remote and cold wasteland that we could have colonized, but chose not to. After all this skepticism, it might surprise you to know that I still believe man will one day walk on Mars. It seems to me likely that a manned mission to Mars will be realized within the lifetimes of many of us, and perhaps we'll even see one or several permanent research bases, though I think it is likely that their permanent residents will be robots rather than human beings. But I do not believe in cities on Mars or a Martian civilization at any point in the next few centuries. I used to, though. It is an exciting dream, isn't it? It begs comparison to the colonization of the Americas, without the moral conundrums of the wholesale slaughter of indigenous populations. It speaks to the pioneer in us, an especially appealing notion to a culture like that of the United States. Manifesting their destiny all over virgin soil is part of their cultural DNA. Perhaps because of the influence of the United States and its unique history over our contemporary culture, there's this persistent idea that's embedded itself into the minds of modern human beings, at least in the industrial world. An idea we humans have about ourselves. It's the idea that we as a species are hardwired to expand past new horizons, to find new places to explore and conquer, no matter what the cost. It seems like an easy idea to accept. We humans have spread to nearly every corner of the world, first as nomadic peoples, later as agricultural empires and industrialized states. I, however, think this idea is largely bunk. If you look at the best estimates, it took modern humans thousands of years to spread from Africa to the farthest reaches of Europe and East Asia, and as much as 50,000 years to reach the tip of South America, all for a journey that can today be covered by foot in one human lifetime, as the National Geographic reporter Paul Salopek is doing in his Out of Eden walk. To me, this doesn't look like the relentless spread of a species bent on conquering the planet, but more like the slow and steady dispersal of an animal to new environments where it can survive. Humans don't seem to me any more driven towards exploration for its own sake than are rats or pigeons or ants. This is why I think drawing parallels between Mars and the Americas is poppycock. The Americas were not colonized because of some compulsion that drove Europeans to explore, exploit, and enslave the New World. They were colonized because it was profitable. In economic and material terms, Mars has zero in common with the Americas. The planet cannot support independent pioneers. There is no arable land outside of enclosed greenhouses the colonists themselves would have to build. But if you believe that Mars will be colonized in the near future, I encourage you to ask yourselves these questions. Do you know anyone from Antarctica? Did anyone you know spend a semester at an Antarctican university? Can you name a single Antarctican celebrity or artist, or the year when an Antarctican team won the World Cup? Of course, the answer is no. Antarctica is a polar wasteland, frozen throughout the year and mostly inaccessible during winter. It is devoid of economic value, such as easily extractable resources, and its climate makes life unbearable for all but the hardiest of animals. Its only value is to scientists who visit its coastal bases and the tourist industry. Nobody calls Antarctica their home. At best, it's the world's longest commute. It remains the only continent with no indigenous human population. Over a century has passed since the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. Yet to this day there is no Antarctican culture nor an Antarctican way of life. Once the explorers had reached the South Pole, the novelty wore off, and Antarctica became just another unwelcome place to non-scientists. Not that the idea of colonization wasn't ever floated. In the mid-20th century, some imagined domed cities powered by nuclear reactors and complicated mining complexes drilling into mountains beneath the ice. But none of that was ever realized, because there just wasn't a good enough reason for large populations to inhabit such an unforgiving place. Complicated land claims and a system of Cold War treaties cemented the status quo of Antarctica, and the continent has been left in peace for decades. Yet if the nations presently laying claim to slices of Antarctica suddenly decided to renounce their treaties and begin the colonization of that lonesome continent, that Herculean effort would still be 1,000,000 times easier than starting colonies on Mars. In Antarctica, there is air to breathe and a pressurized atmosphere our bodies can function in. If something goes wrong there, the colonizing nations can support their pet projects with extra resources delivered within days or weeks. No such luck on Mars, where help from back home would be months or years away. I believe that once human beings have for the first time walked on Mars, and the planet has lost its allure of being the last untouched frontier, public interest in the planet will go the way of Antarctica. Much like Antarctica is a continent constructed by and for science, Mars will be an entire planet dedicated to science. Because much like Antarctica, Mars isn't just deadly and unprofitable. It's also quite boring. What strikes me about the Martian landscape is how tedious it really is, once you disregard the fact that it is, in fact, another planet. We use the most advanced cameras in history to take pictures of stones and gravel that might have come from somebody's backyard. And if you don't believe me, you should know that only one of the pictures I just showed you was actually from Mars. The others I took on a snowy day outside my home, and added a little red hue to them. As looks go, Mars isn't all that special. What's special is that we can reach this unfathomably remote place with these wondrous machines and send back high-resolution images from another planet. That is a stunning monument to our species' inventiveness. But there's nothing wondrous about Mars itself. It is a bone-chilling rock, bereft of life, where human beings could survive only by tunneling into the ground like worms, never knowing the sun against their skin or the wind in their hair. It is no home for us. I believe there is only one reason we are so fascinated by Mars. It's because when it comes to searching for life in outer space or dreaming of a new world to explore and inhabit, Mars is all we have. Venus is an even worse prospect. A greenhouse hell where lead flows like water beneath an acid sky, and Mercury is a blasted wasteland dangling on the precipice of our infernal sun. In the outer solar system, we find only the great gas giants and their moons, and beyond them, the two ice giants and asteroids wrapped in freezing, everlasting darkness, distant, desolate, and dead. Beyond the borders of our solar system, we cannot travel. Not now, perhaps not ever. This pale blue dot suspended on a sunbeam is the only home we have, perhaps the only home we will ever have. Perhaps one day, centuries or millennia from now, our distant descendants will transform Mars into a garden with technologies we can't even dream of. But that civilization will not be us. That civilization will be as distant from us as we are from the Aztec Empire of the Mesoamerica, or they were from the Qin dynasty of Imperial China. For us, our generation and our civilization, there is only Earth. And as long as that fact remains, Mars is nothing more than a mirage in the night sky.